Madam President, I'd like to start by saying a few words about the horrific shooting that occurred in Houston, Texas about 5 o'clock yesterday. A team of narcotics and patrol officers from the Houston Police Department were serving a warrant. As soon as they breached the door at the home in southeast Houston, the suspects opened fire. 4 officers were hit, 1 critically, and 1 other was injured as a result of an unrelated mishap. 3 of these officers are in good condition, and 2 remain in critical but stable condition in the hospital. For the case agent, the most senior officer on the narcotics squad, this is the 3rd time he's been shot in the line of duty, once in 1992 and again in 1997. He told Chief Art Acevedo, "I had to get in there because I knew my guys were down." I echo the Houston Police Union President Joe Grimaldi, who said last night that enough is enough. This type of attack against law enforcement is unconscionable and unacceptable. These are dedicated public servants who've taken an oath to serve and protect our communities and who sacrifice potentially their very lives every day to keep our families safe. So today, with a heavy heart, I want to thank the Houston Police Department and law enforcement officers across the country who put on the uniform each morning, never knowing what the day might bring. We're incredibly grateful for their service and the tremendous sacrifices they make. I also want to acknowledge the work of the Houston Fire and EMS Department, who moved heaven and earth to ensure these heroic wounded officers got the medical care they needed as soon as possible. I want to thank my friends Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner and Chief Acevedo for their leadership during this very difficult time for the city of Houston and our entire state. My wife Sandy and I are praying for the officers and their families and their brothers and sisters in blue. Madam President, on another matter, the Senate is, of course, considering S1, a package of 4 bills that were considered in the 115th Congress, but the clock ran out before these bills could be voted on the Senate floor. Each of these bills enjoys broad bipartisan support, and I'm glad we have the opportunity to push this legislation over the finish line this week. The administration recently announced that U.S. troops will begin a conditions-based withdrawal from Syria. While we await additional details on the timeline and extent of this move, we must take action to ensure the stability of the region during this process and reassure our allies of our commitment. My friend and colleague, Senator Rubio, the lead sponsor of this bill, once compared the threat of ISIS to a tumor. He said if you treat a tumor with radiation, it will get smaller and smaller and smaller, but if you stop before it's completely gone, it will come back. So it is with ISIS. First and foremost, the Strengthening America's Security in the Middle East Act supports our allies in the region, including Israel and Jordan. With Israel in particular, the bill authorizes the United States to provide military assistance to support funding cooperative programs to develop, produce, and procure essential military equipment like defensive missiles and rockets. This will help Israel maintain its qualitative military edge against an increasingly well-equipped Iranian-backed force. This bill also provides U.S. state and local governments with greater flexibility to counter the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS, movement. This anti-Israel crusade has waged economic war against the Jewish state by pushing companies around the world to boycott any business with Israel or its entities. This does not outlaw BDS activity, but instead provides state and local governments with the same flexibility afforded to private companies. They can decide not to do business with companies that are boycotting or divesting from Israel. To support our ally Jordan, this bill authorizes legislation to strengthen our defense cooperation. With an estimated 740,000 refugees in Jordan, a very small country, this legislation recognizes the immense impact the ongoing conflict in Syria continues to have on neighboring countries, including the state of Jordan, and it supports that government's efforts to provide ongoing humanitarian support. The final piece of the bill speaks to the ongoing conflict and humanitarian crisis in Syria, which has claimed the lives of some 400,000 people. 400,000 people. It provides aid to impacted communities and condemns the heinous human rights violations committed by the Assad regime. Notably, it imposes new sanctions on anyone that does business with or otherwise financially supports the Syrian regime. This is certainly not an effort to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Unfortunately, Syria has been broken by the civil war and the fact that Iran and Russia and terrorist organizations are all vying for space and influence. But it is an important step to protect U.S. interests in the region. That's what this bill represents. Notably absent, though, are strong measures focused on addressing the region's primary antagonist, and that would be the nation of Iran, the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, is a branch of Iran's armed forces with an unconventional role. Unlike standard military operations that promote national security, the IRGC tries to squash democracy movements both at home and abroad by pushing its extreme ideology beyond Iran's borders. This branch wields vast power and influence, and it uses its capabilities to spark turmoil throughout the Middle East. What I find particularly concerning is that the IRGC, the primary military appendage of the Ayatollah, is the one in control of Iran's ballistic missile system. That's the same program which unfortunately only accelerated under the previous presidential administration of President Obama. The primary enemy of the IRGC is Israel, who it threatens both directly through its land bridge across Iraq and Syria and indirectly through its support of terrorist groups like Lebanese Hezbollah, Hamas, and other Palestinian militant groups. The IRGC funds terrorist proxies by providing heavy weapons, training, and funds to advance the Iranian regime's goal of regional domination. It's helped Hezbollah alone amass more than 100,000 missiles capable of striking virtually anywhere in the state of Israel. The financial machine that keeps these operations afloat consists of a clandestine network of front companies, including energy, construction, telecommunications, banking, and finance sectors. We're not talking about just a handful of small businesses here. It's estimated that the IRGC alone controls a quarter of Iran's economy. So yes, this legislation does take important steps to promote U.S. interests in the Middle East, but actions against the IRGC are desperately needed. In addition to the threat already posed by this group, we cannot allow our withdrawal from Syria to open up the window to Iran and its terrorist proxies. Today, I'm offering an amendment to this legislation that will address the actions of the IRGC. This amendment enjoyed bipartisan support last Congress with 8 bipartisan co-sponsors in the Senate and more than 220 co-sponsors in the House. This amendment is entitled the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Economic Exclusion Act, and it will take steps to increase economic pressure on the aggressive actions taken by Iran and executed by the IRGC. The bill will impose additional sanctions on the IRGC by lowering the threshold to sanction entities supporting these activities. That means that the front companies that are bankrolling the IRGC's attacks against our allies can now be sanctioned, effectively cutting off their cash. In addition, it penalizes any other person or company that supports the IRGC, including a complete ban on transactions with U.S. businesses or individuals. Of course, in order to sanction any entity, we first have to know they're associated with the IRGC. This bill would require that entities for which there is a reasonable basis to believe IRGC owns at least 33% to be reported and included. It also requires a report analyzing foreign and domestic supply chains that in some way support or aid the IRGC and its activities. I hope my colleagues will support this amendment and take a strong stand against Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, and its military arm, the IRGC. This group has supported the genocidal Assad regime and has the...
There's over 8,500 videos on this one Mox News YouTube page. It takes a great deal of time and effort to do that. I am not asking you to agree with my politics. I'm not asking you to appreciate my Rico Suave style. I am simply asking you to appreciate the facts that this service survives solely on tips and donations, and that you are a better person than to use a service that you know survives solely on tips and never tip. If I'm wrong, if I'm giving you too much credit, I would be really surprised about that. And I know you think that somehow I should be making, I mean, I do millions and millions of views, I should be making lots of money, and I don't. You can go and look at my GoFundMe page and realize immediately no one's giving anything back. Not no one, this little teeny tiny percentage is giving something back. It's easy to realize, okay? I don't monetize any of these videos. I don't take away from you something. I don't reach into your pocket and scoop out a little bit of time. Oh, it's just 10 seconds of your life. You're never going to miss that 10 seconds of your life. Here, I'm going to go ahead and just scoop this 10 seconds of your life out, and just scoop this 10 seconds of your life out, just scoop this 10 seconds of your life, and this 10 seconds, and this 10 seconds, and this 10 seconds. I don't do that to you. I give you bits of knowledge that you're seeking. If I was not giving you something, you wouldn't be here. I work very hard. It takes a lot of time and effort to get more than 8,500 videos on a YouTube page. Imagine how long that would take you. Tens of thousands of hours. Please just acknowledge the fact that you are better people than someone who would use a service that you know survives solely on tips and never tip. Please acknowledge that. And you should really realize that it makes you feel good to tip someone. It always makes me feel good to tip someone, especially someone who does a good job, especially if I can tip generously. I'm always like, yeah, that's right, I'm one of the good ones. Be one of the good ones. Feel good about something. Give something back to someone who has given you and this community so much. Please. Okay. Thanks very much for tuning in. Stay cool. One of these days this war is going to end. Till that day.